All right, continue, I guess.
Yeah.
Garbage. All right, so let me bring up my Prezi. All right. So we'll get into it, right into it. 14th Amendment is a lot longer than I thought it was. So I didn't prepare for this early enough, and I thought I could just jump in and get prepared. And it took me most of the day just reading, just trying to catch up on it. This is one of those things that's, there's 5 sections to it, which kind of takes me back to the articles when we, like I said, we felt like we were never going to get out of Article 1. So the 13th, 14th, 15th, we went over the 13th, 14th, 15th amendments were all done during Reconstruction. Right after the Civil War, when the United States was coming down hard on the states and on slavery, we won the war, and they were going to take full advantage of that. So the 14th Amendment, what it says now, like we normally do, I'll just read the whole thing, and then we'll break it down bit by bit, because when I get done, there's a whole lot of reading here. And when I get done, your head's just going to be swimming, kind of like it was in Article 1. So I'll break it down by sections right now. Section 1. Section 1 states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. Section 2, representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president or vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive or judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged except for the participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. So that is way confusing. When we break it down, it's real easy. The part that's in yellow was amended by the 26th Amendment, which obviously took down the voting age to 18 instead of 21. Section 3, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Section 4, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss of emancipation of any slave. But all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. And Section 5, which is pretty easy, and remember it started out the 13th Amendment, where they are giving Congress the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So it's long, it's wordy, it's confusing. Section 2 especially is confusing. But we're going to break it down, and it's going to be pretty easy by the end. 14th Amendment is a huge amendment in our history. It's a huge amendment with the Constitution. Discussion, questions before we move on and start breaking it down? Anything at all?
Section 3 was the one that kind of got me
thinking of the term insurrection and wondering if that's part of why they're pushing that term right now. I think if you're gonna get into section 3 in a little bit, we can hold off as we
Yeah,
get
yeah, I am.
Okay.
All right. Also, I'm drinking my coffee out of my Bill of Rights mug. If you guys remember my disappearing Bill of Rights mug. And for some reason, I have never thought to warm up my coffee with a little bit of whiskey during these things until tonight. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever done. So moving on. So let's talk about sections 1 and 2. So 14th Amendment was passed by Congress July 13th, 1866, ratified 2 years later, July 9th, 1868. Section 1, primarily written by Congressman John Bingham of Ohio. What's up, Ohio? Representing. So it took 2 years to get this thing ratified. You got to remember, though, we're coming off Civil War. Everybody in the South hated the 14th Amendment. They did not care for, and you'll see why here shortly. But if you remember, part of Reconstruction is that the states who were part of the Confederacy that wanted to break away from the United States were only going to be allowed back in if they ratified 13, 14, and 15. So it took a couple years, but we got everybody on board. 13th Amendment, what was it? Who was it? Who was the one that just ratified it a few years ago? Mississippi? Do you remember? I think it was Mississippi. I don't know if that's the case with this one. I would assume, however, that there were holdouts that did not ratify this thing until probably within the last few years. Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States. Oh, there we go. I got all screwed up. You ignore number 2 for now. I did not have time to go through this thing like I normally do, just to make sure everything works right. So who knows how this is going to turn out. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. All right, so let's unpack this. The very first thing 14th Amendment says is that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So the 14th Amendment right off the bat is now giving citizenship to slaves. That's basically what this is about. All the emancipated slaves were given citizenship by the 14th Amendment. And it placed 3 new limitations on the states. Now, you remember the Article 4, that dictated to the states what they are not allowed to do. And this is going to go along that thread, and it's going to dictate 3 things to the states that they're not allowed to do. Number 1, the states shall not make or enforce any laws which take away the privileges and rights of citizens. 2, shall not deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And 3, shall not deny any person within any state's jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. So the reason they have to do this is because, if you remember when we talked about it, until the 14th Amendment, the Bill of Rights really only applied to the federal government. If the state denied you what the Constitution provided you in the Bill of Rights, you had no standing. The way it was written, it only applied to the federal government. 14th Amendment puts everything in the Constitution now in force into the states also. And there is no amendment that we have that has been more heavily litigated, even recently, than the 14th Amendment. Lost my train of thought there. So Section 1, anybody got anything? Thoughts, concerns? Now, if you remember, obviously the big thing, right? When we started this country, we're saying that everybody's equal, but clearly everybody wasn't equal. Women couldn't vote, women couldn't own property. I mean, let's not even talk about slaves, African Americans in this country. What they meant by everybody, all men are created equal, was all white men were created equal, basically. Indians had no representation until, I think the 20s. Women obviously couldn't vote. They couldn't own property. And African Americans, I mean, even after the 14th Amendment here, right? It took until the 60s for us to get through and, get rid of segregation and whatnot.
I noticed that it doesn't say anything in there about a Department of Education or healthcare or anything like that. Still doesn't say anything there.
Duly noted. Duly noted. Does it say anything about Department of Labor?
No, I don't see labor there either.
No, it's not.
Nope.
Okay. Don't get me off on a tangent. I bet if you're close enough to Renee, I'm sure she's throwing something at you right now. You're trying to take advantage. You're trying to take full advantage of my ADHD and getting me off on a wild tangent about the government, and I'm not going to fall for it.
So that was pretty much the way of the world back then. I mean, it wasn't just here. I mean, wasn't that pretty much the way it was throughout the rest of the world?
Well, sure it was.
Oh,
Yeah,
so much
man.
for the 1619 project.
And well, right. Yeah. According to the 1619 project, we had slavery here for 400 years, right? But yeah, I mean,
We're the only ones.
That's one of the things though, man, that's such a great, the 1619 project wants to talk about how slavery was here for so long, but really, I mean, what was it, 80 some years, and we got rid of slavery. We did what the rest of the world couldn't do. We couldn't come right in, right? If you remember the founders, there were a lot of the founders that did not agree with slavery. And long before the Civil War, abolitionists in the North were already fighting against slavery.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, number one, shall not make or enforce any laws which take away the privileges and rights of citizens.
Mhm.
Would that include a Second Amendment restriction?
Yeah. Shall not abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Yep.
So essentially
would
what this
say-
is saying is that the states can't make or enforce any laws that take
Correct.
away Second Amendment rights.
Correct. But you see, though, that is, I mean, it's happened in Chicago. It happened in DC, right? These states that think they're going to come in and usurp the Second Amendment, which before the 14th they could have done. But these gun cases are coming out, and the Supreme Court's, knock on wood, has been fairly good to the Second Amendment, I guess. God, I can't believe it's escaping me right now. What's the big one out of DC? Heller.
Yep, Heller.
Yeah, Heller. Heller was huge. And I don't remember, I'm not going to remember the case out of Chicago right now, but it was the same thing, just a different place. But yeah, the 14th Amendment is the argument that they're using on that.
Yeah, I was going to say something about the slavery thing we were talking about. Because you're talking about the all the founders. Not all the founders were in support of slavery. A lot of them were on the fence. A lot of debate. In therapy, we do this thing called partialization, right? If a client comes in to my office and I'm working with them, and they have 8 problems that they're dealing with, well, you can't handle them all at once. That's kind of how I look at how the founders handled it. You had taxation without representation. You had all these other things going on, and slavery was the thing they couldn't all agree on. But what they all agreed on generally was that what the British were doing was wrong, and they banded together to fight that first, with the intent. If you go through the Constitution, like they're talking about slavery and abolishing the slave trade as they write it. They just couldn't get everybody on board in that moment to kind of work on that particular problem. And like you said, within 80 years, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that long. But we're having these people in the 1619 project come in and just beat it like a dead horse, like it's something we were proud of. And from the founding, it was something we were disappointed in that we couldn't get solved right away.
No, man, that's a great point. Seriously, that's perfect, right? It was one of those. You're right. Everybody agreed that we shouldn't have taxation without representation. Everybody agreed that we should have our guns. Everybody agreed that the government shouldn't be coming in your house and searching your stuff and taking your stuff without probable cause, without warrants. But yeah, I mean, we fought a civil war over slavery. So they had to pick and choose those battles. No, that's a great point. See, I knew that touchy-feely stuff that you did was going to come in handy one day here. All right, I'm with you. Anything else on section 1? Anybody? All right, moving on. Oh, well, thank God I put it in here, right? So Dred Scott is something we should probably talk about here. The Dred Scott decision, which is historically probably the worst decision that the Supreme Court has ever made. So basically, Dred Scott was born into slavery, but he lived in a free state. He was transported back to Missouri by his owners and put back into slavery. And his thing was that, look, I should be a free man, right? I was living in free states. I'm only here because you dragged me back here. I should not be a slave anymore. And unfortunately, at the time, Chief Justice Taney denied Scott's appeal, holding that African Americans were never intended to be included as citizens. 14th Amendment reversed this decision and guaranteed citizenship to former slaves and their children. So the Dred Scott decision, and it's more than we can get into here. If you haven't read up on it, was an absolute abomination. It's disgusting. Even I can't believe it wasn't disgusting even by standards back then. I know that the country was pretty divided on slavery, but some of the things that were said about African Americans, and I know it's a different time, right? And maybe it'd be different if you were living back in that time, but I mean, just the inhumane way that they were talking about them, and just the property aspect, that they were property and not people, and it's just disgusting. So the 14th Amendment reversed that, got rid of it. So a huge decision for the United States. Moving on, unless somebody has something on Dred Scott.
Not necessarily on Dred Scott, but this is one of those things that I would like to see extended personally onto the abortion argument, right? Those that are born into our citizens, then to me personally, those that are in the womb about to be born as citizens should also have the same protections.
I agree. I agree with you. I guess the question is always the science, right? But hey, got to believe the science. I mean, science, it appears to me, science says that once there's a heartbeat, that they're people. So I don't know. I don't understand the whole argument. I'll be honest. I can't wrap my mind around the
I
argument.
can go hard on that in the after.
Yeah, for sure. But when we're talking about the 14th Amendment and how all protections apply to any citizen. So I guess the way it's written says naturalized or born here. And I guess is the question, you're not born until you're born, right? And maybe that's it. Then we could delve deeper into that. I mean, we could probably do a whole week on this alone.
Fact.
Let the record reflect that I agree with you. Renee, write that down.
But are you alive before you're born?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
I know.
I mean,
We could do a week on this.
I mean, it says born. You know what I mean? So
I know.
I mean, is that going to be the standard?
Then can you technically be dead before you're born?
Okay, Jim,
Yep.
will you get charged with a double homicide if you kill a pregnant woman?
Yeah. I mean, you are.
Okay.
But the
That answers
wording,
the question
wording in
right
the
there.
Constitution is born.
Doesn't that determine based by what state you live in though?
Can of worms opened.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No, I
you know what?
believe
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it's a state's issue. I mean, you'll be charged. I think, can't you be charged federally? I don't know. I'd have to look
Is it
into,
murder? Is it murder a federal crime?
well, it's a state crime too.
Yeah,
The
so I
feds don't
think
come
in
in and
some
arrest
states,
you every time for federal or for murder. Yeah, I mean, it's a state crime in every state. I don't know. I'd have to look into that. But that's going to get me off on such a tangent right now. So I'm going to move on. Section 2. So section 2, and this is the one that, I mean, when you read it quick, it seems to be the most confusing to me. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the base shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. Lots to unpack. So basically, in a nutshell, what this does is change Article 1, Section 2. This is the biggest change, that only counted slaves as 3/5 a person for representation purposes. So if you remember, back at Article 1, Section 2, when the Constitution was written, it was a compromise that they made with the slaveholders that slaves were only going to count as 3/5 of a person for representation. The 14th Amendment changed that. Slaves were now counted as a whole person in every state. Indians still not taxed because Indians belong to their own group until 1920s when we made them citizens. They were not citizens of the United States, so they're always carved out of this thing. How is it that that's all I've got? Section 1 and 2, really? All right, so I left out a whole section. So moving on into here though, so what this does is it allows for states to be punished for not allowing, in this case, while they didn't say it, they meant it, African Americans to vote. So any male inhabitant of such state being 21 years of age and who is any way abridged, with the exception of participation in rebellion or other crime, their representation shall be reduced by the number of people that they are not allowing to vote. Now, this isn't 2021 we're talking about, right? This is 1868. So I don't know how they would get those numbers. I mean, unless they're basing it off census, I don't know. I have no idea. But it does provide a mechanism in here for the states to be punished for not allowing those over 21 at the time to vote, males over 21 to vote. So yeah, I have no idea how they're going to figure that out though, but it sounds good on paper. Section 2, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. The biggest thing, like you said, is changing Article 1, Section 2. Counting the slaves now as full, giving them full faith credit. Anybody? All right. So we'll move on to Section 3 and 4. So Section 3. And this is the one Brad wants to talk about. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who have previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Now, this was written to basically punish anybody who waged war against the United States in the Civil War. So the Confederates, out. Anyone took part in Confederacy is out unless 2/3 of each house votes to remove such disability. Brad brought up a good point. If I guess it would be, yeah, I mean, for Congress, for the president, the way this is written is that if you are basically a member of government at all, and you have taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, and you engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, that you cannot hold any office.
Yeah, and kind of my thought is on that is, you know, they just impeached President Trump, and it went through. He was impeached in the House,
Not convicted.
but not convicted in the Senate. But I don't know. Yeah, I guess that kind of clears it up. But yeah,
Had he been
impeached in the House.
convicted, though, right?
Yeah,
the
you're right.
14th Amendment is where they're going to fall back on.
Yeah, you're right. So I think that's, in my mind, that's where they were going with that, is try to get this in part so that the president can't run for reelection without, the 2/3 majority of the House. To
And
reinstate
actually, I
it.
don't even know. I mean, reading this, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States. So it doesn't say that you can't run for reelection. It says no person shall be. So my guess is if you were truly convicted, if he was impeached for the insurrection and he was convicted of taking part in insurrection against the United States, he would be removed immediately. It doesn't say you can't run for reelection. It says that you shall not be.
Yeah, but if he was impeached and indicted on that, the impeachment process alone would stop him from run for reelection, no? Because once you're impeached, you can't run for reelection.
Once you're convicted.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what, once you're convicted.
Yeah,
I
but
think so.
I guess the question here is, do you think it would remove him immediately? Which obviously it would, right?
Oh, you're talking about if he were to get convicted of the
Right.
January 6th thing.
Right. Now, they don't necessarily have
Yeah,
to.
that's a good
They
question.
don't necessarily have to, upon impeachment, they don't have to necessarily remove you, right? You got Clinton served out his term. However, what Clinton did was not insurrection.
But Clinton was in the same thing as Trump, where he was impeached in the House, but he wasn't convicted in the Senate. Exactly.
Oh, he what? I thought he was not convicted.
He was not convicted in the Senate.
All right.
All
right.
Yeah. I don't think.
But even if so, they would not have to remove him if they chose not to remove him.
And
But I guess
the
my
next thing
question here with Trump would be, according to the 14th Amendment, do they have a choice? I think you would have to be removed at that point, right?
I agree. I guess my next thing would be with Trump. Does anybody try to bring charges up outside of the House and Senate? Do they say, hey, we're going to have the DC federal, the district bring up charges on some, I don't know, could you?
Not as of yet.
It's still under
Not yet.
investigation, so not yet.
They're waiting to see what he decides to do for 2024. Whether they're going to put all the work in or not. No, for sure. But reading this, I think he's out. I don't think there's any way that if you're found guilty of insurrection, if you're impeached and convicted of insurrection, I think you have to go. I don't think you can even finish out your term. It just says no person shall be, period. It doesn't say you're allowed to finish out your term. You're not allowed to run for re-election. However, keep in mind, the very last sentence here is, but Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So again, with this politicized environment we're in, if let's just say he had been and he gets removed and we take, the Republicans take back the House and the Senate, although 2/3 is pretty tough, but they could certainly remove that disability and then allow him to run again. It's all politics. And I don't know if anybody who was part of the Confederacy, anybody know? Anybody that was part of the Confederacy?
I'm not aware of one.
That the disability was removed?
Yeah, I'm not aware of one. And I know there was still a lot of respect for Robert E. Lee. Yeah, or not. Yeah, Lee. There was still a lot of respect for him, and he handled the Confederacy, and had them surrender appropriately, and not do guerrilla warfare afterwards and all that. So he got a lot of credit for that. But if he didn't get it, I don't know who would have. I don't know that he tried, but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a whole lot of congressmen, lesser congressmen that we don't know about. I just wonder if any of them ever got through. All right, section 3, anything else on that? Anybody? Nobody? Section 4. The validity of public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. So basically what this is, it holds that all Union debts are valid. The government is responsible for all those, but any Confederate debt is immediately void, to include any claim from former slaveholders for monetary loss. So if they had just bought a slave and now he's been emancipated, so sorry, maybe you shouldn't have been a shit human. And that's basically section 4 in a nutshell. It is holding that all public debts authorized by law for the Union or for any services in suppressing the insurrection or rebellion shall not be questioned, but neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay on any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection. So the way I read that is once you sign back on with the United States, that you, although how does this work? Because the states were still paying pensions to the Confederate soldiers, were they not? Until they died.
I'm not aware of that for Confederate soldiers.
Oh, they were. I know that they were.
Okay.
Occurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States. Weren't any claim. I'll have to look into that. I'm almost positive that they were still paying pensions, and they were paying pensions to wives upon the death of the soldiers. I'll have to look into that. I'm almost sure that happened, which would confuse me a little bit on this,
Yeah,
because
I
they're pretty clear
remember
here that no
story-
state.
Yeah, I remember a story from within the last 5 years that the last widow of a Confederate soldier just died. She was like a 16-year-old when her husband was in the Confederacy, and she lived to be super old or something like that. And she was still getting her
Good for her.
pension from the Civil War.
Right,
I just
right.
looked up, going back to people who were expelled for supporting the Confederacy. There was like 10 or 11 senators that were expelled in 1861.
I know they were expelled, but were any of them, was the disability lifted on anybody? Did anybody fight for the Confederacy, and then the House and the Senate came 2/3 each house and said, hey, look, it's all right, you can run for Congress?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Oh, I know yeah, man, they cleaned house after the Civil War. Anybody
This
that
was
even
actually before the
assisted.
Civil War. The expulsions.
Yeah, but that,
Sorry.
but it was still because of the insurrection, though, against the United States.
Well, part of it was also they did not support the Lincoln being reelected.
Huh.
Yeah, well, because that was also what started secession, was Lincoln being reelected. And once that happened, then these it says they're expelled in 1861 for the disloyalty to the Union, as well as some formal resignation. Some of them resigned, some of them were expelled. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's all right. It's all right. That's why, I mean, it's easier for you guys to look it up than me.
Yeah, and it was actually Lincoln's initial election, not the re-election, because the Democratic Party was split between the Southern slave-supporting Democrats and the Northern not slave-supporting Democrats, and that's why the Republicans won. So his re-election, he got shot like a month after his re-election.
Oh, yeah, you're okay. Yeah, that sounds more right.
They died in November of 1865, I think.
All right, anything else? All right, so real quick, closing discussion on it. So the takeaways from today, a lot to unpack with the 14th. So it granted citizenship to all persons, born or naturalized. All persons really being the slaves, the emancipated slaves, if we're being honest. That's what this was all about. All citizens were granted equal protection and extended the Bill of Rights to the states. Now, the equal protection clause, we didn't talk much about it, but women were allowed to own property now at this point. African Americans could own property at this point. As soon as you were a citizen of the United States, which, if you remember in Section 1, the very first sentence of Section 1 basically made everybody a citizen of the United States if you were born here or naturalized. Then you could you were able to own property, you were able to run for office, obviously the voting. Well, I guess women still weren't, not until the 19th Amendment. But it was a start. It punished the states who abridged the voting rights, that abridged voting rights, and it banned those from holding office if they participated in insurrection or voided any claim of debt from the Confederacy or from slaveholders. And then we didn't talk about 5, or the Section 5, but all Section 5 is authorizing Congress to enforce this section by passing laws, which they've done numerous times, right? All the civil rights laws, things like that. And that's how I have a feeling that's how Congress right now, it's how the Democrats are trying to get this voters' rights. I think they're probably relying a lot on the 14th Amendment for this, the fight that they're trying to do now. But in doing that, they're also trying to take away a whole lot of power from the states, which is where their problem's lying. Nobody's really being denied the right to vote. I think people are seeing right through exactly what they're trying to do here. So, but I have a feeling they're probably leaning on the 14th Amendment for a lot of this. I don't think it's going to fly. So, anything? Closing discussion on the 14th. 15th, probably next week, 15th and 16th, we'll probably get through. 15th is going to be pretty easy.
Can we start over? I missed the first 3 points.
Yeah.
No,
So
you can do
Just
my
kidding.
video.
Just kidding.
no. I got no. Here we go. All for you, Mike. All for you. All this right here. Hey. All right. So today we're going to talk about the 14th Amendment. We talked about 13th Amendment. Last week, 13, 14, and 15 are all as a result of Reconstruction. Just kidding. I'm not really going to go through it all again.
That's what the recordings are for.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I'm glad you made it though, Mike. Glad
Yes.
you made it. Sorry about the loss. Tough one. You almost beat Avon, which would have been a big.
We played them tough. I'll say that. We didn't almost beat them. We
All
lost
right.
3-1, but we played tough.
All right, fair enough. I'll take that. I'll take tough. All right. So, does anybody have any questions on the 14th before we end this, or any discussion? Anything on the 14th?
Question.
Did I go too quick? Is anybody sitting here completely lost right now?
I got one.
Yep.
Does this, will this may possibly in the future have anything to do with what this new book about what General Milley did to China as far as being treasonous or anything like that?
Well, man, this is going to be a good discussion. Probably not for right here.
Right.
Yeah, man. I mean, if this stuff is proven to be true, and you've got
Treason.
the chairman, Joint Chiefs, who is going behind the president's back and basically brokering deals with a
Foreign government.
Dude,
I don't want to say
I
enemy.
missed something on that.
Oh my
Vindeman.
God, dude.
I don't know what you're talking about. Kind of.
Vindeman
Yeah. So
called him out. The whistleblower for Trump's impeachment called Milley out and said that he should resign for that. That's how bad that is.
yeah,
That's pretty bad.
yeah. So Chris basically Milley went behind Trump's back. he had a closed door session with his people at the Pentagon and said, look, I think Trump's losing it. If he, any talk of nuclear weapons, waging war,
Is any order
you will
period?
ignore that unless I'm involved in this, right?
Well,
So he went behind Trump's back and has basically usurped the commander in chief's authority and said, you will not follow these orders unless I'm involved in it. And even worse, he calls China on his own, speaks to his equivalent over there and says, look, we're not gonna launch any kind of attack on you, any nuclear attack on you. If we are going to launch an attack on you, I'm going to call you and give you a heads up first.
Wow.
well, my
Ouch.
understanding of the role of the Joint Chief, it's not even, it's a consultative role. He has no authority over the military or
Oh,
anything
Millie
like
thinks
There
that.
is
otherwise.
absolutely nothing in
Right.
in the Constitution gives him the authority to
Right.
step
So,
behind the back of the commander, the commander in chief.
right. So if he
So
did
if
that, then yeah, and yeah.
So,
treasonous,
well, this is
Yep.
this is the problem with what happened in the Trump administration.
Reason.
So that was obviously the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but I can't remember if it was the Secretary of the Army or the Secretary of the Air Force, one of the two, purposely delayed getting stuff to the president's desk until after the inauguration because he thought that President Trump was going to not sign or adjust the promotion for certain generals. Because he just knew that President Trump was going to not allow X amount of women to become general officers.
this is
And it's
just
like,
this information that's
unbelievable.
coming out is absolutely insane. Just absolute lunacy. You're talking about a duly elected president of the United States. Now, there's a process in place, right? And we just talked about it last week. If you think the president is going crazy, we have a process in place to stop that. And that's the 25th Amendment, right? If they truly believed that the president of the United States was going crazy, then they invoked the 25th Amendment on him. All of his powers go to Mike Pence, and he's neutered and just pushed aside. But they didn't do that. They went
Until he
behind
says
his
that he doesn't
back.
want to be pushed aside again.
What's that?
Until he says he doesn't want to be pushed aside again.
Well, sure, but then remember we talked about that too. I mean, if he comes out and he says, "Hey, look, I want my power back," well, then I mean, there's, they can still come out and say, "Look, we don't believe." If they get enough people on board with them, we don't believe that he is capable. But my point is that was never even approached. They went behind his back. They went behind the president's back to basically an enemy nation. I mean, I know we don't consider, I mean, by definition, China to be the enemy, but they are. They're an enemy nation. Went to them and pledged that we were not going to attack them, and went further and said, if we are going to launch an attack on you, I'm going to give you a heads up. What is that? It's treasonous. And I can't wait to see how this plays out. Now, my guess is nothing happens about this.
Nothing happens with any of this crap.
It's
just
unbelievable.
It gets
It's
talked about
unbelievable.
for a week on the news and then nothing happens.
Oh, this isn't even going to get talked about. You're going to need to go to the right places to hear about Millie. This isn't even going to get talked about.
That's
It has to, listen, it has to get talked about by you guys on your socials. It has to get talked about by people, with their neighbors, and it's got to get talked about by independent news sources, and it's got to get brought up. It's got to get brought up by, you guys have to be calling your senators and your congressmen and saying, hey, look, I want this talked about. We've got to make a big deal about this, or it's not going to get talked about.
Coop,
like,
the word coop is trending on Twitter right now.
Oh, dude, for sure.
156,000 reactions.
Listen, for sure, what Millie did was a soft coup, for sure. He
did
went
you
behind
know
the
that-
president's back and got all of his staff officers on board with not taking orders from the sitting president of the United States and only going through him.
The problem is in this country, though, I have zero faith. I mean, we've been seeing stuff going on for, over a decade. I have zero faith that anything's gonna get done about this.
Well, and that's why we're here, Chris, right? We're here because how many people don't know what the 25th Amendment is? How many people don't understand how the government is supposed to work? How many people don't understand what the state's rights are in all of this and what the state's power is in all of this? That's why we're here. And we're not here just for you guys to listen and, oh, okay, we talked about the 14th Amendment and then just wash it, right? We're here for us all to learn about the Constitution and then take it out to anybody who will listen, to talk to your kids about it, to talk to your parents about it, to talk to your friends and your coworkers about it. That's why we're here. We're not here just to have our little conversation on Tuesday nights and then forget about it. And then so that we can get to the end and say, oh, well, I sat through and I read the whole thing. That's not why we're here. We're here
I'm
to
here
take
just
this
for the
knowledge
free
out.
gift. When's that drawing?
Right. But that is, man,
Kelly has a question.
And
Who?
how many of your elected officials that swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States has no clue what it is? Guilty. I mean, I was guilty.
sure. No, 100%. And there are people in Congress right now that don't know. I mean, we joke about it like they don't have any idea what the Constitution says, but there's people in Congress right now. Are you telling me right now that AOC knows what all these amendments are, that she has studied the Constitution? Zero chance. Zero.
She knows how to make a drink.
Well, maybe.
Well, and I think too that, like, I didn't know when I got sworn in, I was swearing to the Constitution. I didn't know
Well,
that.
and and we've talked about this before. When I'm field training these guys, these new policemen that go in there and they hold their right hand up and they swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. The very first question I ask them when I get them is, have you read the Constitution? And it is unbelievable how many of them say no. And I said, well, how can you swear to uphold and defend something that you have never read?
That should be part of their initial training in
It should be.
Ohio peace officer training.
It should be part of, it should be back in the schools. It should be more than just reading the
Well,
preamble.
yeah, back in the schools. And not only that, but if you're being sworn in as an elected official, no matter at what capacity, you should understand that.
You know what?
I mean, you're swearing to an oath.
Not only should you have to understand it, every elected official, and there's actually the Committee for Modernization for Congress, that's one of the things they want. Not only should you have to understand it, I don't care if from local level all the way up to federal level, if you get elected, you should have to go through a course like this, or something like this, where you are reading the Constitution, we're talking about the Constitution, this is what it means, and maybe it goes quicker than this, but there should be something in place where you, Holly, get elected, and for the next 3 weeks, you are learning what the Constitution says.
There's your retirement gig, Jim.
Yeah.
Not me, man. There's gonna be better people than me doing that, right?
At least the section of the Constitution, the article that is pertaining to the job you just took. So if you're in the legislative branch, you got to read that section. Executive, you got to read that section. Judicial, you got to read that.
Yeah,
section.
but Brad, the problem is though, the problem is
At the very least.
But the problem is that the whole thing is based on checks and balances. So yeah, you have to read your section, but you also have to know what the executive does, because you are going to be the one tasked with making sure he doesn't overstep those bounds. So
You're right, but how many people don't even know their own freaking left and right
100%.
limit within their branch?
100%.
Jesus, man.
Sadly, the Constitution is glossed over in most government classes nowadays. And when I say glossed over, I'm being
right. These
generous.
kids are learning, they're learning the preamble.
I'm being generous when I say glossed over.
Right. No, 100%. So, I don't know, man. The whole thing's disgusting. When I figure out more on Millie, we'll talk about it.
Hey, I got a question, Jim.
Yep.
So in section 3, where it says there, and I apologize if this went over, I may have missed it, but
Oh, by the way, this is Jose. Jose's a buddy of mine. We talked about the Everyday Constitution, and he said he was going to come, and boom, here he is. So, Jose, welcome, my man. I'll
Thank
be
you.
here every week. Man.
Welcome.
Thanks. What's up,
Welcome.
Mike? I'm sorry. I was so in section 3 where it says I just lost it. This to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given or aid to or comfort to the enemies thereof. So my question to that is, with this whole debacle of Afghanistan and now basically given, what was it, $65 million in humanitarian aid, if you want to label it that way, does that kind of borderline that sentence there as far as giving comfort to the enemy? I'm just trying to figure that part out.
Well, I think the big word there is
trying-
the big word's going to be thereof, right? It's not giving aid or comfort to the enemies. It's giving aid or comfort to the enemies who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion. So no, I understand what you're saying. I mean, that's a whole different thing to unpack, giving aid to our enemies. And certainly the argument could be made whether or not it was treasonous. As far as section 3 goes, I think thereof is going to mean simply giving aid or comfort to any enemies who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States.
And
Now
by the
I know
way,
why they hate Mike Lindell so much.
I'm
He's literally
reading
giving
this.
comfort.
What's that?
Now I know why they hate Mike Lindell so much. He's literally giving comfort through my
Oh,
pillow.
Stop it. No, he's not. I had a My Pillow and I threw it away.
The workaround for the money, I think, is that it's going to the people of the country that are affected, and it's going through the UN. So that's why I think the loophole for the money is not really going to them. Where my stick is all the military equipment that they had left there and they received. That's giving aid to me.
Oh, sure it is. Sure it is. Now, I will say that, I mean, there's a whole lot of videos and a whole lot of information coming out that we destroyed US assets over there. And it looks like we destroyed probably most of them, or at least made them inoperable. But however, it looks like, I mean, the majority of their equipment that they got, the US equipment, was given to the Afghan army. And when the Afghan military just turned tail and left all their stuff back there, obviously the Taliban got it. But there's videos out there, and you talk to a lot of the people that are coming back from there, and they talk about how they destroyed a lot of our equipment. You know, they made almost everything they could inoperable before they left. And you see pictures over there. There was a C-130 that was missing, you know, all the blades on one of the propellers, and you know, and that seems like something. I mean, over here we'd have mechanics fix that shit in a day or two, right? But over there, I mean, you take the blades off of something, and it's just going to sit there and rot.
Here they opened up a military surplus store out there called Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's. I saw that. That's fantastic. So I got off on a little
So we're
tangent.
off. Yep.
Well, to a point. I mean, we got off on the 14th.
Yes.
I think we're talking about the Constitution, though, and I think it's a good talk. You know, this is the Everyday Constitution group. It's just the topic for tonight was the 14th Amendment. We covered the 14th Amendment. As long as we stay on topic with the Constitution, I don't have any problem at all getting off topic. We just have to stay on mission. We can get off topic, we can't get off mission. And
Exactly.
I think this conversation tonight was a good conversation. I think it's certainly on mission for the Constitution. But you know, I just please listen to what I say. Man, this is not about us showing up here on Tuesdays. This is about showing up here on Tuesdays, getting the information, and then getting it back out there to everybody else, getting it out there to people, to your friends who are ignorant about the Constitution, getting it out there and getting people excited again about states taking their sovereignty back, making people aware of what the government, you know, that's half the problem. That is why we've gotten to where we are, because nobody knows what the government's allowed to do, right? The government does something, you just assume that the federal government's allowed to do that. Federal government's allowed, I mean, they're so big, they can do whatever they want to do. Or, you know, man, well, the Department of Labor says we have to do this. I mean, that's a federal department. We have to do it. Well, but But if you go all the way back to where the Department of Labor started, it is completely unconstitutional, which therefore means that everything the Department of Labor has done since their creation is unconstitutional. It's the fruit of the poisonous tree. Fruit of the poisonous tree. Department of Education, same thing. Everything the Department of Education has done since their inception has been unconstitutional. That is 100% the state's domain.
That's where people need to, people really need to start understanding that the state sovereignty is under attack right now. And it has been for some time. It's really starting to come to full blow right now.
That is it.
And
They have stepped it up.
yeah, big time. And people need to understand that, you know, I mean, the governors are the only ones really in our way or in the way, blocking the federal government. And that's just I'm strictly speaking for the governors who are willing to stand up for their state. But people need to stop. I mean, you're starting to see people kind of, you know, want to have the federal government run their lives, but it comes down to state sovereignty and state rights. And that's what's under attack big time right now. We need
100%. Now, the states are waking up. I'll give them that. Within 3 days of Joe's 6-point plan on the vaccine mandates, you had 21 states who came out and said, look, we're not doing it. 21 states. That's huge. I mean, you're talking almost half right there within 3 days. Now, it's probably even more now. I don't think DeWine's come out. DeWine has come out and said that he thinks this is a mistake, but he has not actually come out and said, bullshit, you know, you're not coming to Ohio with that.
Right.
But that's where there's state elections, man. You can't blow off state elections. That is where it's at. You got to put people in office in your states that understand state sovereignty and understand federal overreach. And are not.
I am so proud of my governor here.
Oh no, you guys got it with DeSantis, man. He's, you know what, right or wrong, he's making decisions for his state. Whether those decisions turn out to be right, they turn out to be wrong. It's his decisions to make.
That's his job.
It's not the federal government's job.
That's
it's
right.
And you know what? And if he
and if the
makes a wrong
people-
decision, he will answer to you for that.
Right. If
That's
the people
right.
don't like it, that's when you vote out your governor. So
Where you move.
100%.
And I am so happy that he is my governor. I can't even tell you.
Which is why the Biden administration is absolutely losing their minds right now, because they cannot control DeSantis. You know, a year ago, Cuomo was the poster child of COVID-19 and how well he took care of things. Meanwhile, he had the highest numbers in the country. DeSantis did a great job, and he was just criticized all along, and he's still being criticized for the way he's handling it. It's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And you know, the thing is too, and I said this on one of my lives the other night, you know, I was drinking and I'm swearing, and I swear a lot more when I drink, but you know, when I was talking about going, you know, if I do ever decide to run at a state level, or no matter what I would run for, you know, listen, man, I swear, right? I do. I don't answer to anybody except for my constituents. That's it. I don't care what somebody in Nevada has to say about me. I don't care what the governor has to say about me. I don't care what the president has to say. I don't answer to anybody. And that is what these legislators, either in state level or in the federal level, need to remember. It doesn't matter what the president says about you. It doesn't matter what anybody says about you. It doesn't matter what Governor DeWine says about a federal congressman, right? All that matters are the people in your district that voted for you. That's it. Those are the only people you answer to. Nobody else. You don't answer to lobbyists. You don't answer to governors. You don't answer to the president. You don't answer to people out of your state. Don't give a shit. You would answer to whoever's in your district voting for you, and that is it. You represent those people, period.
Yep.
So.
All right, well, good job today.
All right. I will see you guys at the post.
Post. Okay.
Yep.
Jose, just so you know, we have a little post discussion. It's another Zoom meeting. Renee's going to post a link, and it is a lot less structured. There's a lot more drinking, and you can talk about anything you want to talk about there. So, and nothing is recorded. So, if you want to
On
join
that
us
note,
there,